or talking to myself like, are you a loser? This thinking is not right for me. That you have to separate facts from feelings. If you don't get the job you're looking for now, doesn't mean like your career is done. You can't be too harsh on yourself that I have to do this in these like year or two.
Any such moments where you sort of needed to reassess where you were? Where, for example, I saw in one of your videos you attempted Google sometime and then were not met with the best of feedbacks. Any like big change you did, not just after that, but after like some things or some failures which you sort of understood or you sort of registered with yourself, hey, this is not who I am. I need to change something. Anything of that sort?
Yeah, actually, I'll give two different examples. The first one is not related to failure, but I would say probably being unintentional. So when I was in Bloomberg, for first few years, I was totally unintentional about my career. I was just happy that, oh, I got this job, now life is set. I did not have any idea what I wanted to be after like 5 years, 10 years. Thankfully, I think I did not get that question probably in interviews. I don't remember, but yeah, I didn't have any idea. I probably would have just made up some answer. But after probably about 6 or 7 years, which is a pretty long time span, I realized that I need to be intentional. So I won't call that like, oh, I did something wrong, but I wasn't doing something right. I was just kind of steady state, whatever that's going on. But then I was looking at my other friends who were progressing in their career, and I did not know what progress is. Partly also because in Bloomberg, it's a flat kind of hierarchy. Like out of college, you join as a junior software developer. After 3 years, if you're still there, you automatically become senior. And then there is nothing after that. Like you could become a team lead, which is like an entry-level manager, and that's like a promotion. But once you're a senior developer, there's no like principal staff kind of thing. So it was a little difficult to judge that or assess your growth. So that was one point where I thought that I cannot just let this continue for a long time. I have to be intentional about my career. And then fortunately I was performing well, so I chose the being a team lead route. And of course that did not happen instantaneously, but I had intentional efforts in getting to that stage. So that was the first thing where, first example where I kind of had, there was no one instance where I feel, okay, click, something has to change. But over the period of time, observing other people, observing my own this thing that, okay, what exactly am I doing? Like I'm doing okay, but do I just want to be okay? Or do I want to go a little further? So that was the first realization. And second is the example that you gave, right? Like I tried for Google and Meta in 2020, March. And I failed both interviews. It was extremely heartbreaking, mainly because I studied a lot. I prepared for almost 6 months. And also I had good credentials behind me, right? Like 10 years at Bloomberg, 6 years at Amazon. So it was very, it was like a significant kind of punch to my ego. And I was devastated. And in general, I think the COVID time was not very good time for mental health.
Was this during COVID?
It was during the peak of the COVID, like March 2020.
This must have been like a double punch on your mental health though. How did you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I handled it pretty well initially. Like I may have even cried a couple of times, not in public, but definitely in private. And I started asking like, or talking to myself like, are you a loser, right? Because 6 months, nobody takes 6 months to prepare. And even after having such background, if you cannot clear even one interview, then are you a loser, right? And then that kind of thing started like on repeat mode. That, but then I fortunately, I also was in the habit of reading self-help books. And then I fortunately caught at that time that, hey, this thinking is not right for me. And I don't remember where I read that, but there's a very good advice that you have to separate facts from feelings. So the fact was that I did not clear the interview. The feeling was that I was a loser. But if you see my profile until that point, for many, it was a dream career, right? Like graduating and surviving and thriving. Exactly, surviving for 10 years, not just surviving, thriving at Bloomberg for 10 years, which is also a pretty competitive workspace, becoming a team lead over there, then getting into Amazon, getting a promotion into Amazon. So this is not a typical path for a loser, right? So that was a feeling, I realized that it was a feeling that I was having because of what just recently happened. I cannot deny the fact, like I did not make it, but that doesn't make me a loser, right? Yeah. And I tried to like repeating that in my head, that you are not a loser. You did something that did not work out, means that you probably could try something different. But if you keep telling yourself that you're a loser, then you're never going to make it, right? So I like almost like affirmations. I repeated that multiple times, and then I tried to then analyze that, okay, what may have gone wrong. And then I specifically like sought feedback from recruiters about like if they could offer anything. Fortunately, they offered not in the beginning, but when I was ready to apply the year after, I got feedback on the behavioral side of interviews. And that's why if you see my tweets, like there are a lot of tweets focused on the behavioral aspect.
Absolutely.
Because everybody is focusing on technical, which is important. But as you grow in your level, behavioral plays a big role. Like just being technically sound is not enough.
And once you go into a lead sort of a role, the responsibility of a few folks and their outcome relies on you.
Yeah.
Or their direction or the ship sort of is steered by you. So does that like really count? Because in a lot of beginner interviews, the HR round is a mere say a given. You just go meet with the CEO, say nice things. I have no weaknesses. My strengths are my weaknesses.
Or sugarcoat your weakness strengths.
You can usually the answer which I give is, hey, I'm just too perfectionist, which is not fair. But is there something which like happened there? Okay. In usual beginner level interviews, there's hardly any focus there. But in senior level interviews, this comes in picture. So how did you get this feedback and then how did you work on it?
So it wasn't a foreign concept for me because I was already a manager, because I was also conducting interviews. I knew that behavior interviews play a big role. And the trick with the behavior interviews is that there is no right or wrong answer, right? So as opposed to, let's say, coding, you know that if the program is going to work or not, right? But in behavioral, like you don't know. So my problem for this specific interview feedback was that my answers were not level appropriate. So I was applying for L6 level, and they felt that my answers or the data points that I gave, like examples, situations that I mentioned, they could have been handled by a lower level manager. So then I tried to be intentional about like how could I get such points that would help me kind of overcome that barrier, right? Or what points could resonate with the interviewer a little more. And fortunately, this is where also I think I had tweeted earlier about networking, how it could play roles in different ways, right? It's not just can you refer me, like that's one aspect of networking. But because I had a strong network, I could actually reach out to my other L6 level managers and kind of basically discuss with them that, hey, is this project sounding like an L5 or L6? And then I got like honest feedback, right? But they didn't have anything to hide. So they said like, yeah, this sounds more like L5 because this and this. So then I realized that, okay, maybe interacting with multiple teams or being in a team where it kind of gives you that opportunity more. Not that I did not have that in my previous team, but I wanted to try something different. So that's when I transferred internally in Amazon, which gave me those opportunities. And I could then incorporate those data points in my behavioral interviews. And also, I probably did something wrong, or suboptimal is probably the right way of explaining my thought process or explaining those data points, right? So I made sure that now whatever I'm talking is getting across, like the point is getting conveyed with the right level in mind. Yeah, I mean that you're being too harsh on yourself if you have that. Right? Because if you see typical career, right, 35, 40 years, right? If you say you're graduating at 22, retiring at 62, that's 40 years. For people who ever want to retire early, even still you're going to work for 30 years, right? 30 years is a long time. If you don't get the job you're looking for now, doesn't mean like your career is done. Right? Like even a lot of time I see on Twitter, on YouTube, like people want to get into FANG right after the college, right? It's a good aspiration, but what I'm trying to say is like if you don't achieve that right after college or even in first 2 years, that's not the end of it, right? If you look at me, Bloomberg is a good company, right? But if you strictly look at from the FANG perspective, I got into FANG in 2015, right? So, and I completed my undergrad in 2000. So 15 years after my undergrad, I got my FANG job. Right, which to me is a success.
Yeah.
Right. Even Bloomberg was a success, but I'm just comparing that. If somebody had this, like, oh, have to get into either Amazon or Google, Meta, etc. Like, so it works out, right? So you can't be too harsh on yourself that I have to do this in these like year or two. But being intentional about, okay, this is where I want to be, and then, as you said, like work backwards. It's actually a famous principle in Amazon that you have to work backwards, like from whatever goal you're trying to achieve, a project, work backwards from that, have correct milestones, understand what needs to be done, and then work towards that.